What's going on, guys? Welcome to the Too Much Test podcast. This is episode 10. I am joined with David Demesquita and Sam Stolt. You can find David on YouTube. Look, David Demesquita, and Instagram, it's dynamite_D. And just search Instagram for Sam Stolt. You'll find him on there, and you'll also find him on YouTube. So what's going on, guys? How are you guys doing tonight?
Doing freaking awesome. How about you guys?
I'm doing amazing right now. At the end of the night, I may be a first-time home buyer. What's going on with you, Pete?
Same old stuff. Just want to let you guys know we may have an IFBB Pro competitor dropping into this podcast, so you might want to stick around. Should be a pretty good time. We're not guaranteeing anything because technical stuff happens.
He's actually ready to join. He said the link is not working. He said an error.
Well, you can iron it out. You had just mentioned you guys came back from a vacation, right?
He's driving right now.
So I went to the beautiful city of Miami for a friend's 40th birthday party. I went to an Airbnb, had a good time. Miami is crazy expensive for no real reason if you're ever planning on going there. But so the fun part, last day, we pack up all our stuff, put it in the car. We were going to, this girl booked a drag show / like brunch where they feed you and these people dance around, all that stuff. All good. So I go about halfway through, I forgot something in my car and I go back out to the car and I walk up to the passenger side and I look and I said, there's no way I forgot to close up this window in Miami. And then I started to notice a little glass. But it was only a little bit of glass. It wasn't as much as I would have expected from a two-door car because they typically have pretty big windows. So it didn't click for me for a second. And then it clicked real hard that someone had smashed in my girl's window. Now, here's where it gets interesting. So
technical difficulties.
Just had a little technical difficulty, but so here's where it gets interesting. So I have a belt that has a knife in the belt buckle. I brought it everywhere. No one's ever figured it out. And it's old and it broke. So I was standing in line to get into the show and the belt broke. And I was like, shit, my pants were all loose and I was carrying Glock 43 on me, which I do normally. Oh, sorry, guys, my phone's screwing up. But so I go out halfway through this show. And I put the gun in the trunk under some other clothes. Now, most of our luggage was in the actual car, which is a really bad idea. I typically remember not to do this, but we were hungover. We were going to brunch. And so I'm looking through the car and I'm like, oh, shit, what did they take? And then I look in the trunk. My gun was still there. Thank God. So these guys got away with my Adderall, some of my girl's prescription medicine, some clothes, a curling iron. And these idiots missed one of the bags that had 2 really expensive watches and a gold necklace. So basically they got some prescription pills and they missed out on jewelry and a gun. So really good criminals. Screw you, Miami. But anyway, pretty wild.
Oh, man.
Did they give you a percentage of the profit from all the drugs they took, though?
No, they did not. They're greedy like
broke
that.
In.
But what's crazy was the reason I figured this out, why I didn't see a lot of glass. So they didn't smash the window in. So what I believe they did was they put suction cups on the window, smacked it with something like one of those things that can, like those emergency things to break the glass. And because it's tinted, it held that stuff together. And then they just yank out the window and throw it under the car. So as I was talking to the police, I noticed that part of the window was under the car and I pulled it out and it was basically just folded in 2 pieces, all spider webbed.
Oh.
Does it stop the alarm from going off or something like that?
So that I don't know. The alarm was not on when I got to the car. So we don't know if it ever went on or not. But I mean, I think it's just a cleaner way to do it. So they just walk up real quick, put the suction cups on, guy smacks it with a thing, they pull it out and slide it under the car. And then at that point, it pretty much looks like they're just standing near a car with the window open.
Wow.
Wow.
I have a Tesla and it has cameras, like 8 cameras all the way around it. And I used to live in South Carolina before moving down to Florida about 10 months ago. And the parking lot, I lived in an apartment complex. So there's a Sentry mode. That's your security system on the car. So it will actually get set off if you trip one of the ultrasonic sensors. Ultrasonic sensor is like a 3-foot like perimeter around the car. So if you come within 3 feet of it, it will start recording, and then it saves it to your thumb drive, right? So I like to just look at the footage when I get into the car, see if there's any crazy thing going on. So I click on the footage, and it was in the middle of the night. Somebody had parked. It was a parking lot, so somebody just parked next to me. I see this girl get out of her car. She comes around the car, opens her passenger side door up. She takes her like McDonald's bag. She sets it on the ground. And then she goes to like kick it. It doesn't really go anywhere. She shuts her door, gets into the back seat, does something else. And then she like apparently notices her McDonald's bag is still on the ground, and she just kicks it to the curb. And I was like, what? This is why there's always shit in the parking lot. But like, not that they didn't bring it to my car or anything, but it reminded me of that story. People get caught all the time trying to go through and like, scratch or key Teslas because it records along the side of what you're doing. Yeah,
I've seen that
camera facing backwards. It's pretty cool.
So one time my friend was headed back from Buckhead, right? And they were just walking in their car. There was a brick of cocaine sitting next to the curb right near their car. A brick. Probably a pound, right? Or a kilogram. I don't know what a brick is of cocaine, but I assume it's what, $30,000 to $50,000, maybe more. Just
kilogram, about 53,000 street value. Nothing exact.
Just get wild guess, right?
Car was broken into. Yeah, okay.
$52,000, $25 ish. If you had to guess.
Oh my gosh. Well, yeah, but and I was like, and you didn't take it? They're like, no, I'm not trying to die.
So what do you guys do? Leave it there?
I wasn't with them. Like my buddy was just like, he tagged me. He's like, dude, there's literally a brick of cocaine sitting here. I'm like, well, how much money you would want to make?
I gotta tell what. So before, when I was younger, I wasn't allowed to date. So I was homeschooled my whole life. I wasn't allowed to date. So as soon as I started, basically, I got on my own and started dating. All I wanted to do was sleep around. So I go out to the club, and I had met this girl somewhere previously, but then I saw her at the club. I hadn't slept with her or anything. So she comes home, and I had to work first thing in the morning. So I had 2 roommates. They obviously in their own rooms, whatever. Well, I sleep with her. Then I was like, hey, I gotta go I'd given her a ride. So she didn't have anybody get home. And she texted me like while I'm at work. She's like, oh, your roommate's charging me $50 to give me a ride back, whatever. And I was like, oh, sorry. I get home when I'm done from work after being up all night. I just plop into my bed, and I slide my arm underneath the pillow to use it as just pillow my hands underneath it. As I do that, I find a bag of cocaine underneath my pillow from her in my bag. Yeah. Oh man! And then she texted me, and I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know what you're talking about.
So she paid $50 and then lost X amount of dollars in cocaine.
How do you not pay attention to your drug stash that you're just randomly leaving at some dude's house that you don't know?
That is hilarious. That's random.
And I just my roommate. I was like, dude, you charged her $50 to give you a ride home? This was before Uber was taking off and stuff like this. This is back in the day. So I had a question on a previous episode that somebody had actually asked. His name was Darren on YouTube, and he wanted to see if we could talk about Deca only cycles. And he was like, "Oh, Deca only. Then you don't have to deal with hair loss." So I wanted to hear what your guys' thoughts are.
I'll just give you an example of someone that I know that did this, and then I'll let David tell us, the scientific reason behind it. But I knew a buddy growing up in high school, got into bodybuilding, not hardcore, but his first cycle ever was Deca only. I think 500 milligrams. I don't think he planned to do it that way. I think that was just what he was able to get and didn't know any better. And he said that he couldn't get it up for a month and a half, 2 months after that cycle. And he said it was the worst thing ever. Just it would not get up no matter what, full on ED. And I'll let David touch on why that may have happened.
I'm not going to dive into Deca too much, but it is a NOR19. So NOR19 is a progesterone-based drug, essentially. It's going to affect your prolactin levels potentially, but estrogen is not something that's talked about with Deca because it doesn't aromatize heavily because of NOR19, right? Which is true. But what people don't talk about is that it upregulates the production of estrogen via enzyme. So you upregulate your estrogen. An aromatizer inhibitor can't help you with it if it starts to upregulate. You just have to take less or stop taking it. That's why the guys that get erectile dysfunction with it, they're just better off not to take it. You can't really counteract the side effects of that. And I believe that that's part of the reasons why it happens. Now, also, like I don't have lab work on like Deca individually, which is something that I probably need to do at some point in time because the side effects aren't like miserable from Deca. But what I can tell you is Deca by itself, and I've had myself in relative experience with low test, high Deca, and I do perfectly fine. Okay? Like perfectly fine. And by high Deca, I mean like 500 or 600 milligrams. I can't remember off the top of my head, but that's about the max threshold that I ever go to anyways. Stuff. And I was perfectly fine. And then I actually get harder, leaner, and I actually get better erections with Deca, which a lot of guys do not. It's like polar opposite ends. Now, then I've also done where it was a break. I had a coach that had me do it, and he wanted to take a break off of testosterone for a short period of time. And that break on the testosterone, literally within 2 weeks, I became clinically depressed. I cried during a Disney movie on the way back home from Seattle on a flight. And I was like, why can I not like want to stop crying right now watching this movie? And I was taking some aromasin, right? Like, because I knew I had some estrogenic side effects going on.
So you're taking Deca only, so you drop tests and you're taking Deca only for the cycle. And this is when you're like, oh my God, this Disney movie is so amazing. And you get emotional.
So it was from a blast. Like it was a longer blast. The longest blast I ever did. I think it was like right around like 16 weeks or so. And then the whole ideology was you take a break from the test, then you go back into the test after you're on the Deca for a bit of time so the body gets a break, maybe potentially resensitize. Now what ended up happening, and I just realized this entire time we've been muted on this podcast, I think. No, we're not. Either way. So and then you basically resensitize and you add the test back in and you're super sensitive to it and you just do TRT because I had to come off. And what ended up happening was erectile dysfunction, clinical depression, anxiety, extremely emotional, but in a depressed sense, not angry, no sense of aggression in the gym. And, you know, when I landed from that flight, when I walked back into my apartment, I loaded a syringe full of testosterone. I injected it. And within 2 hours, I felt like a man again. I didn't feel 100%, but that's how low my test, whatever got low. I don't know what got low on blood. I assume my test like bottomed out.
So question. So Deca, from what I've read, Deca does convert to estrogen, but it's like 10 to 20%, depending on where you're looking at. But is it actually converting then, or is it through the upregulation?
It's upregulation of the production of it, which is weird.
Like the aromatase enzyme?
No, it's not aromatase. It's I would have to get you the actual like enzyme name of some sort. David is small because he's sitting so far back looking at me, blah, blah, blah. Sam is quiet when he's talking. It's not muted. It's just inaudible. Okay, whatever. So
let me pull up the
wait. I'll turn on my desktop volume. There we go. Fixed. Okay, so either way, it doesn't aromatize heavily. It's via another enzyme. And I literally would have to look, and you're looking it up right now. You're trying to find it. I don't know if you're going to be able to find it. I know for a fact though. I think it starts with the N. I can't remember, but it does affect estrogen levels. It doesn't aromatize though. Like the aromatization is like null and void. It's actually like 10%. I think it's very, very low, or 20%.
You know, it's interesting while you guys are looking this up, and I was watching a video by Mark Plummer, and I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with him, but he's a shorter dude from Canada. He's strong as hell. Anyway, he basically was running a cycle. I mean, it was like test, Tren and Deca, and Tren and Deca are both 19 NORs, which can help deal with that or increase that prolactin. And he actually attributes more of from that cycle getting gyno because of such high prolactin. But a lot of people and just the general knowledge think that only estrogen, is able to cause gyno. And I think some of the other research is showing that, prolactin can also be included in that as well, because I guess supposedly there are prolactin and estrogen receptors in breast tissue. Long story short, you can get bitch tits from a lot of different ways. So it's not just estrogen.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
Yeah. No, I was just going to say testosterone, Tren, and Deca was a really common old school thing that used to be run all the time. And that is something I literally would refuse to do. In fact, I just had a consult earlier where I advised hard against it because it is so much prolactin production that you're getting. I mean, there's only so much prolactin you're going to try to inhibit in progesterone with the B6 or cabergoline. It's like, why take something that you just don't need?
Well, you've got 219 North, right? You got Deca and you got Tren. Like, why not take one of those off and put on a DHT-based compound instead?
And balance it. But go ahead.
Yeah, it's okay. So right now, this is more of a selfish question. I want to hear both of you guys' thoughts on this. I think most people run personally, from my POV and my risk tolerance and my objectives, most people run far too much Tren if they do decide to run Tren. I've never run it before. I have some, and I am going to be
allegedly.
Of course, I came from my doctor. So I'm going to be going to 250. I'm already up 3 or 4 pounds, 5 pounds or something since the low point from it was probably just the glycogen stores refilling, but I have a theory that you can basically almost eliminate all side effects with Tren with a micro dose and then every other week. So, for example, say something be like 20 to 50 milligrams week 1. Week 2, nothing. And you can use a different compound. Week 3, back to Tren in that 20 to 50 milligram territory and off and on like that, so that you don't have that compounding effect, because it is so incredibly strong, and you have negative side effects from the duration, but also the dose, and then idiosyncratic risks, right? So we can't really talk about idiosyncratic risks because that's individual, but the time of which somebody does something, and then the dose, like the length of which they do it, and then the dose in which they do, you can control both of those things, right? So to mitigate both of those risks is do like a micro dose and then also take every other week off. And I'd like to hear what you guys' thoughts are, or if you guys have ever run Tren and what your experience was, or if you've ever thought like, let me try a microscopic dose of Tren and see what you think.
So I've never run Tren. Tren scares me. I don't think anyone's ever tried what you just said, because when people start Tren, it's like, we're on Tren, baby. There's no way we're just doing it 25 milligrams and then skipping a week. We're going to 350, 400 every week. I mean, from what I've seen, a lot of different stuff, a lot of scientists and different studies with different compounds, they're finding that microdosing can have some really good effects. One of the things that you may think is crazy, that people are using microdosed ketamine for like anxiety, PTSD, same thing with stuff like MDMA, LSD. So, I mean, it's been shown that little bits of compounds can have drastic effects on the body and on the brain. So I don't see why something as strong as Tren, microdosing, couldn't work. Now, you also have to figure out, and kind of think like, is that compounding effect and it always being your body one of the reasons why you get what you need to get from Tren? Or is it, can you microdose it and that little bit will help?
So there's an echo in the background on your side, David.
On my side?
Yeah. Or maybe it's on my side. I don't know. I'm sorry. That was on my side. I was trying to see the chat in the live, and it didn't work. I just played the sound. I apologize. I was like, "Oh, Dave, that's your fault." No, definitely my fault. My apologies. Okay, Dave, what are your thoughts on the microdosing and the microdosing dose, but also microdosing time?
Okay,
because it's not common, but a lot of shit is not common.
Microdosing on mushrooms, phenomenal. I can attest to it. So it has been proven to basically clear up depression, open portions of the mind. Microdosing hallucinogenic drugs have shown amazing benefactors for depression, cognitive functionality. I even get a sense of focus. Now, maybe I'm taking lower amounts than other people. I don't know. I take like a small, little, minute amount, and I get some benefit out of it. And I only do it like 2 or 3 days and take a break, and then 2 or 3 days and take a break. And it just levels you, grounds you a little bit. So I can speak to that one. That's that. And then as far as microdosing with hormones, a little bit different in my eyes. Like some people are huge fans of microdosing and they back it up with science, and I get it. I understand. I mean, it's more stable when you microdose. It's not as much processing for the body at one time. But one of the issues is the scar tissue buildup over time. But even though you're probably using insulin needles when you're microdosing, the other issue with microdosing is it's almost too perfect of a reality world to live in. The body likes cycles. So when we're putting in drugs, it's all about half-life stability. And even with an anthate, if you're shooting it 3 times a week, that's almost like perfect half-life. It's above perfect. It's above a peak of what it normally would be if you're doing it twice a week or once a week, like would be prescribed. The body likes cycles. You're technically, in theory, supposed to replicate the cycle of a natural body, which would be injected testosterone cypionate, inject it 14 days later, which is 2 weeks. Now, the issue is that we know we have estrogen issues with that. So now I'm going to snapshot forward to the Tren on the microdosing for a week. Now, it depends on the ester. Obviously, you would want something that's going to be actually affecting your system in a short bit of time. So I'm guessing you talk Trenase.
Yeah.
Okay. So, because the half-lives definitely make a difference when we're talking about this.
And I would honestly probably do like 10, 10, and 10 or something like very, very small.
Okay. So I'm going to speak from some personal experience here. One, with drugs, with hormones, we want stability. So microdosing is fine in my eyes. I personally think that I don't want to be a pincushion, so I think 3 times a week is plenty. Tren usually start to see psychological effects from my personal experience after 6 weeks if dosages are in lower ranges. When they're higher,
define lower ranges, because my POV on things tends to be a little bit different than other people, and I just want to make sure I'm understanding what you're saying when you say
so lower intelligent dosages on Tren, I believe, are between 100, which would be a clinical dose back in the day, to 200 milligrams, which was still a clinical dose. They actually had I believe it was a front load protocol with Tren on women. And it was like 160-ish, 150-ish, 160-ish for the front load. And then it was a very long ester. And then it would go over into 76 milligrams a week. Now, hormones are about stability, right? So let's hit on that topic a little bit. You want to keep that stability and the protein synthesis as high as you can for as long as you can with minimal side effects. I think a titration method is probably a better approach. Microdosing is still fine, but 100 milligrams a week, you probably should see very bare minimal side effects. 200 milligrams a week, I still think you would get. Go ahead.
So I want to push back on that because right, it's been shown you can like hypercompensate, right? So when you deplete glycogen stores, and then you can kind of like super compensate, and you're like, oh, actually, hit a PR because I deflated myself, and then I fucking was able to expand past that. And that's like the first example that comes to my mind. But I don't remember where I was looking into this, but I found another example where it actually applied to training, where like taking a certain amount of time off and then going back in, you hit a PR. So I know a lot of people like to keep hormones at some baseline level, right? So testosterone, obviously, keep that, right? I think that's an intelligent thing. We probably all agree on that. But any other anabolic on top of that, I see potential that some type of fluctuation, you can build on that theory of like going one direction and then letting it come off of that so you can super compensate the other direction, and having that like swinging back and forth in there.
Well, here's an interesting question. Here's an interesting like scenario, and I'm going to do it with Sarms just because I can do the numbers real easy. So it's kind of like similar. So do you think that someone would get more gains from taking 1 milligram of RAD 140 a day, or from taking 365 milligrams, let's say over like an 8-week period. Like they trained for the full year, but one person did an 8-week cycle at 365 milligrams. The other person took 1 milligram per day.
I have an answer already, but Dave, what are your thoughts?
1 per day, 100%.
Yeah, I was thinking 1 per day.
100%.
Yeah.
So,
but during that, for the last like 3 years, I only do 5 days on and the 2 days off with Sarms, and so I've been able to get up to 250.
So you remember when you're talking about the equilibrium and the hypercompensation? That's actually where I was going with this. So there is a hypercompensation point with hormones. For instance, a lot of guys cut out testosterone when they're going into peak week, right? And when they cut that out, sometimes 2 weeks out, right? You get the hyper-responsive effect on estrogen, right? So you can actually do the opposite of what you're trying to accomplish.
Okay,
and then you're jamming.
So explain the effect with estrogen. So somebody's coming up to a show, they don't want to, they think that they're going to hold too much sub-Q water or whatever. So they're like, I'm going to switch from cypionate to propionate, or I'm going to switch from cypionate to just testosterone by itself, and I'll just do an injection every fucking day, right? Or just drop it completely. So what is your thought process? So you're saying that dropping that, you can actually have a rise in estrogen? I just want to make sure I don't understand.
Yes, because the body loses that homeostasis point. It can increase estrogen by coming off testosterone. That's why guys get gynecomastia when they come off testosterone and they don't PCT. It's not just because their estrogen levels there's that weird equilibrium and a hypercompensation they're trying to happen. It doesn't happen to everyone, right? And like everyone's super bio-individual, and every single time that you would do it, it'd be different. But yeah, you're reducing down the aromatization. You're taking drugs to knock aromatization down, but the body is still trying to produce. So it loses the testosterone, but it doesn't lose the estrogenic side effects. So it can have that adverse side effects. So just food for thought, that equilibrium, it's all about that equilibrium. The body's trying to find it. It's confused because it's probably thinking that it's still getting testosterone or something like that. It can happen. So,
yeah, no, it's an interesting conversation. I've been thinking about doing, there's a study on LGD, like the sun, right? So they did 76 men, LGD 1 milligram per day. Well, they did like 0.1, 0.3, and 1 milligram per day. And they did it for 20 days. And during that 20 days, it was 21 days, but one day they didn't take it, right? So 20 days of cycle consumption of compound. And then there was one day in the middle where they were just checking blood work to see half-life and stuff. And during that time, they gained like 2.6 pounds or 2.7 pounds of lean body mass. And I think of Tren as similar to a SARM in that it's extremely strong. And if you look at Tren, it is slightly selective in the tissue. So and then everybody's like, 100, 200, 300 milligrams a week, right? Why not? Because we know more about SARMs. Well, I mean, I know more about SARMs. There's plenty of literature on Tren, right? And horses and stuff. But why not try dropping that to a microscopic dose? If these guys were taking 1 milligram of LGD and they added 2.6, 2.7 pounds of lean body mass, I was thinking of like initially 7 milligrams. I don't want to do daily injections. So I was like, okay, maybe I don't want to do the daily injection of Tren of 1 milligram. And that would be like something that nobody's ever heard of, but it's effective with LGD. So like on a milligram per milligram basis, would that, you know what I mean? Like LGD is effective in this study at gaining lean body mass at 1 milligram. So why wouldn't, if Tren is as strong as people say it is on a milligram basis, why not take 1 milligram per day for 5 days a week? You know what I mean? I don't know. That was the thought process behind like the microscopic dose on that.
Yeah, SARMs are a little bit more potent per milligram per milliliter though than like any androgenic drug. I mean, unless if you're talking about oral steroids, it's a little bit different. It's methylated, but SARMs are really, really selective. That's why their milligram per milliliter, it's so strong in comparison to steroids, injectable steroids at least.
Well, here's an interesting thing with the Tren. So I think there's a trade-off between how fast you can gain muscle and side effects. Everyone wants to go fast. So let's say you took a gram of Tren, not at one time. I'm just saying that's the amount, 1 gram of Tren, right? And you take that over, an 8-week period, right? Now, that's kind of stretched out. Now you want to get bigger faster. You take that same amount in 4 weeks instead. So in my opinion, what I kind of think is like, steroids can be so powerful. I think that just the fact that some of them are in your body at really any dosage can help you with gains. Now, I'm not saying for bodybuilding and for getting, stage ready that 50 milligrams of Tren is going to get you to the, Olympia, whatever. But I think it's a trade-off between how fast you want to put on muscle and how much damage do you want to do to your body. So I think you can spread out a lot of that stuff in lower doses. Like for me, I'm on 200 milligrams of Test and 100 milligrams of Deca, and I'm putting on a decent amount of muscle, and I'm not on cycle or anything like that. So I don't know. Interesting.
What does that sound?
That's when I get a new follower. I need to turn that down. I have the volume turned up so I can hear you guys. I was like, that is a lot.
Testing levels. It's a very good way, I think, that you positioned that, or like 1 milligram of red per day versus, 365 milligrams over 8 weeks. And that was a very interesting way of putting it because, I appreciate you like highlighting it in that way, because it's definitely a different way to think about it.
But no one wants to tell, a 17-year-old kid like, hey, just take your Sarm stuff for over 20 weeks, and the Sarm example is not 100% great because you will have suppression. So you don't want to be suppressed all year round. That's kind of why they're running cycles. But it was more of just a parallel to having a little bit in your system all throughout the year, may get you more gains overall than just blasting for 12 weeks and coming off.
It absolutely does, because you're going for the protein synthesis increase. And once it's out of your system, you're not getting that protein synthesis increase. And you're getting a lot more drugs in the system that the body has to process. And androgens build over time. That's why titration method is so important, because androgens do build in the system. SHGB does rise in the system. But the lower amounts that you can take for a longer period of time without actually saturating those levels, that's a whole holy grail, is getting less side effects and more gains over time. And that's a whole theory behind titration. When you're talking about women, for instance, right? A lot of people just jump to 10 milligrams of Anavar. Boom, in your face, 10 milligrams of Anavar. I'm like, I know women that can viralize at 10 milligrams of Anavar. The medical dose is 2.5, 5, and 10 for women in particular, right? I'm not talking males. We're not going to viralize. We're already viralized. But if you put a woman on 5 milligrams and they get exactly what you want to out of it, and there's less androgenic buildup, which happens over time. Therefore, the viralization doesn't happen as quick as a rate over a lifetime. So if they're a competitor, why don't you start them at 5 milligrams of Anavar? You can always titrate up. You don't have to stay at 5 milligrams. And then on top of it, because there's less androgenic buildup during that time and you get the benefits of the protein synthesis increase over that period of time, you get exactly what you wanted to out of the drug originally anyways. So that's my methodology, at least when it comes to gear, is less is more. And you don't get the side effects. And if you look at the guys from the 70s, Arnold Schwarzenegger, they'd run 24-week cycles, I believe it was. I think it was 24 weeks, right?
6 months, basically.
Yeah, 6 months. And then they take I think it was a 4-week break, and then they do it again. But very, very low amounts. I don't know how they didn't have issues with all the Dianabol that they took. But needless to say, they're 70-something years old and still kicking it. They look good.
What do you guys take? I had somebody asking me this earlier, without like getting into the drug piece of things. What are some things that people can do to help control and regulate their blood pressure? Because I personally believe blood pressure is right. It leads to ED. It leads to kidney disease. It leads to heart attack. It leads to increased risk of cardiac related issues. It increases the risk of blindness, diabetes. You can go on and on and on, and they're all linked to fucking high blood pressure. And it's not talked about enough. And people are like, oh, I'm only 140. And we're like, well, 140, right? So what are some things that you guys can, like maybe lifestyle, but then also like supplements or whatever that people can do to control that? Because I think that would be something that we should bring to light more to really highlight for people.
I've been meaning to look into that more, supplements wise, for blood pressure. I mean, I would say as a suggestion right off the bat, I mean, lower caffeine and stimulant, amounts could definitely help with that. I mean, I remember when I went into donate blood, and I had drinking a little bit of a Monster before, but I'm sensitive to caffeine, and my blood pressure was high. My heart rate was too high to donate blood, and I had to go home. But I don't know, you and David probably know more about the supplement side than I do.
Sure. So I'll jump into it a little bit. So yeah, the adrenals, what he just actually alluded to is the adrenals are actually located on the kidneys. And when you're looking at blood pressure support, you want to look at electrolyte balance. That's the number one thing, because electrolytes have a diuretic effect on the body. So that's actually how you can pull someone into a show without putting them on pharmaceutical diuretics. Worst comes to worst, you add some caffeine in there. Caffeine's a diuretic. Vitamin C has diuretic effects. Magnesium has diuretic effects. There's a lot of things that have diuretic effects. That's why I'm adamant about not using diuretics, because there's plenty of tools to pull water from a body when you're getting ready for show. Now, as far as overall health goes, I think for kidney supplements, astragalus is an amazing one. It can help with GFR, some filtration. Nephrogen by Morphogen, by the way, that's the best that I've seen with help with GFR. I've seen someone go from I think it was like in the 50s, not 40s, but 50s, which is so low, up to the mid 70s within like less than a month period of time, which is pretty fast for kidneys.
So reference for anybody who's listening, the GFR is like a measure that's calculated by a doctor to gauge kidney function. And what is it, below 60 is bad or something like that? I don't remember. So going to 75 is good. That's a good thing.
Yeah, and it's different for black and whites, by the way, or just black. Black, they actually categorize differently. Like if you can have a lower GFR, but it actually, in retrospect, would be higher. I'm pretty sure.
So those two supplements you mentioned, great for kidney function, and as a side effect of improving kidney function, blood pressure tends to improve as well.
Yeah, as long as you're getting the filtration properly going through the system with enough. The fundamental key is water. The best supplement for kidney health is water. I don't care what anyone else says. Water, water, water. And people do not drink enough water. If you're peeing like funky colors all day, every day, and that's not your vitamins anymore, you're dehydrated. That's that could be the release of aldactone, which actually makes you uptake water. When you uptake water because you're peeing out blood, well, guess what? Your blood pressure is probably high as well. So you want to get your hematocrit levels and iron levels checked. Get a blood pressure cuff. Now, if you want to talk about pharmacology on the unnatural realm, so vitamin C is really good for your kidneys as well. Like really good for your kidneys and adrenals. So then for a actual medication, telmisartan in low dosages can help a ton with people with chronic. It has to be chronic, right? Blood pressure. So that is a really good, cheap drug. But I don't want to really get into pharmacology too much, because people are going to get ideas and they're going to start taking like telmisartan and be like, oh, I have high blood pressure, telmisartan.
When you look at the categories, right, you've got like, there's alpha blockers, there's beta blockers, there's calcium channel things, right? And then there's the electrolyte balances and things you can do on that front. So like if somebody has, say, they're ranging from like mid 130s to say, stage, the higher stages of hypertension, going through and working on things that are going to affect their liver function, but also their kidney function, like increasing their water consumption. If you have a diet that is a decent amount of sodium, adding in potassium capsules multiple times per day or every meal, it will help regulate your sodium, so that the sodium has one potential effect on blood pressure, right? But it's not all encompassing. It's like, oh, sodium, control that and you're fucking fine. No, that's one piece of it, right? Like it's one. So having that, and then you can control that portion of that. Is there any like natural calcium channel or like beta or alpha blockers?
So not off the top of my head, not that I know of, but what I would say for circulatory reasons, dandelion root is phenomenal. Like it actually works better than pharmaceutical diuretics, in my opinion. I mean, besides the people that literally need pharmaceutical diuretics, that's different. But dandelion root is amazing. Like probably the best, better than most pharmaceutical diuretics from what I've seen.
Do you prefer tea or do you prefer capsules for dandelion root?
Capsules, you get the dosing right. But tea is like pretty like chill. You can start your day off with it or something like that, or drink it midday at lunch. And this is for people that have issues like GFR issues and stuff like that, where they can't circulate and they have edema issues and stuff like that, where they're just getting like basically like it's almost like water logging, like locking almost is what's going on. That's a good solution.
MK677, a lot of times people they think they carry fluid because of MK677, but in my opinion, a vast majority of it just due to diet and stuff. Adding in dandelion root, super awesome thing to do because it works as like a natural diuretic. If somebody doesn't want to clean up their diet, which most people don't want to do, and they're deciding to research with MK677 or some other type of growth hormone secretagogue that increases fluid retention, adding in, the capsules of dandelion root or adding in dandelion root tea a couple times a day, fucking super helpful for that shit.
Yep. So here's maybe a little flip, and I think this is going to take us to the full hour. So obviously, Sean Roden passed away at 46, and then just a few days ago, Cali Muscle put out a video that he had almost a near fatal heart attack with like 100% blockage on his left ventricle, I believe. I mean, so this has been in the news a lot this year, about bodybuilders, people that use gear dying. Do you guys think it's just there's more people on gear and it's more public? Or do you think that there's something different that was going on now from the 1970s, 80s when it was a lot more rare? What are your guys' thoughts on why are these so many people dying in this sport? Is it that they have to get so shredded that the organizations and the judges are basically forcing these people to go right to the brink of death just to be on stage, to be so feathered and cut? Or do you think it's just they're using way too much stuff, they're using different stuff? What are you guys' thoughts?
Go ahead, Sam, and then I'll touch on it after you.
So I think that it has more to do with the macro environment personally, because I haven't looked into. There was also George Pierre, right? That was a couple months ago, and then 6 or 7 months ago, I think there was somebody else who passed away. George Pierre, like the classic physique guy. I think it has far more to do with the macro environment in terms of social media, pictures, and stories being told. Like when you think about 25 years ago, 30 years ago, first of all, we couldn't do this. Second of all, if somebody died and nobody fucking knew about it. But the microcosm of bodybuilding online will spread and proliferate that information quick. So there's a lot of that going on. Yes, it could be other stuff, but I just feel like that shit's always been happening. And if you look at the percentage of people who are passing away related to heart attacks or heart-related issues as a percentage of the total population who is bodybuilding versus a total percentage of the population, I don't know. I don't have the data. If you guys have any of the data, please share it. But I wouldn't personally think that it was actually any higher. If anything, I would think it was lower because people who are into bodybuilding tend, not always, but they tend to have a higher degree of understanding one's health and dietary intake of calories and how to do things in an intelligent and thoughtful way. We don't have those negative impacts, you know what I mean? So I think they just get highlighted because of social media, but I don't know if the degree of it actually happening is greater today than it was back in the day. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that, Dave?
So I'm going to go in a time capsule really fast with you guys in like 2 seconds. Bodybuilding, though, at a fundamental piece is healthy. It is competing is an extreme. Diet and nutrition is healthy. Going to extremes to get as lean as you are is not healthy for natural or enhanced, period. In fact, if you're on testosterone replacement therapy, it's probably healthier, and I'm probably going to eat my words for that one. We're going to have some trolls on that one. Being on testosterone replacement therapy is healthier than being natural and going into a show. I've seen blood work on natural guys that come out of the show, and it is horrific. Now, let's go into time capsule really fast. 70s. What were the bodybuilders doing back then? They were bodybuilding, they were doing construction working, they were living active lives, and the only recreational drug that they were doing was marijuana. So, and I mean, maybe drinking. I don't really see anything about drinking. I think it was just marijuana for the most part. Like they liked getting high and training and eating. You know, that was bodybuilding. I think fundamental. And they ran year round. Lower amounts than nowadays, but they ran year round, needless to say. And they usually quit at earlier ages. Now, let's take a time capsule and snapshot forward a little bit. We had Lee Haney reigning for a little while. Those guys were relatively similar to the 70s, I believe. I believe that growth hormone came into the equation at that point. And then the 90s, which is the end of Lee Haney, was when insulin factor came into it. I think that the androgenics were relatively already at that threshold right there. I think that was coming. The androgens were increasing at this period of time from the late 80s into the early 90s, and then in the mid 90s they probably stayed relatively the same. And then they started playing the size game because Yates came out of the blue. I'm sure he was running insulin. I don't think he was running a ton of androgenic drugs. I assume that he would be at like 600 milligrams of testosterone and then whatever androgens on top of it. I don't know. I haven't heard him ever say a public statement about it, but nothing crazy, right? And then you had the use of, in the US, ecstasy was big at the in the 90s, huge. And it was big in the bodybuilding community as well. Alcoholism was a thing. Smoking cigarettes was a thing. And these guys were what age? And now they're starting to pass away. We're starting to see slowly but surely. And then you had the early 2000s where ecstasy was still a thing. I think the alcohol was still a thing, and they were still partying pretty hard. And then they get older and older as these snapshots are going on. These bodybuilders are staying in the game. In the 70s, they were staying in the game until probably like their early 30s or so. I would assume, if I remember correctly. And then they basically stopped bodybuilding. They do bodybuilding, but they wouldn't compete anymore. And now we're having guys that Dexter Jackson was 51 when he retired, 52 when he retired. Tony Freeman was 49 or something like that, and Tony's healthy, and also Dexter, from what I understand. But you have these guys, and they're elongating their careers. They're bodybuilding for a longer period of time. They can make a career in bodybuilding, or were able to make a career. There's still money to make in bodybuilding, but now you have the Ziz generation at 2010 marker or so, where it got popularized to go to raves and do all these hallucinogenic drugs and drink alcohol and mix all these drugs, and you're on steroids and you're making this concoction. And he was prone to a heart attack because he had a heart condition. He died. And now what I'm seeing is some exorbitant amounts, and this kind of started happening in the 2000 range, exorbitant amounts of gear use. And I think that we're starting to see some of the long-term side effects of larger dosages being used. I do believe that the health aspect is slowly starting to trickle into the equation again, because people are starting to realize these guys that are passing away in their 40s. And the other one that you mentioned, by the way, was John Meadows. John Meadows passed away. He had actually a blood clotting autoimmune disease that he had, I believe, to remove his colon in 2008. And that was my coach. That was my life mentor. He was like a father to me. And he passed away earlier this year, and I believe it was a pulmonary embolism, so a blood clot went into the heart. And that's also what caused the year before, but his calcium score was nil, which was usually caused by steroids, and he didn't have any. I believe his calcium score was like a 0, if I remember correctly, non-existent. So it was an autoimmune disease that took his life. But in I'm going to do the last little point. I want to hear this. In 2020, if you look across the board at all sports, we have guys dying in their 20s of blood clots. And I'm not going to say the correlation there, or 2021, not 2020, 2021. We have guys in their 20s that are soccer players and 30s that are dying of blood clots. How are soccer players dying of blood clots?
But you're talking about something else, I think.
Exactly.
Good thing you're saying the political talk at the end.
No. But I just want to say that these are just correlations that I'm kind of seeing, and the trend. So some of the stuff has changed. They take steroids for longer amounts of times. There were a lot of recreational drug use. Not all the bodybuilders were doing it, but a lot of them, I believe, were doing it. They would get drunk after the show. Shoot, Ronnie Coleman won his first Olympia when Kevin LeBron went to his room. Did you see that documentary? Kevin LeBron went to his room, and I think they had pizza and alcohol, and they just got drunk together, and they showed up peeled on stage and won the Olympia.
I thought it was interesting, a couple of things that you said. So, we're seeing someone who died at 46, like Sean Roden, but he did the damage to his body, 10, 20 years ago. And then maybe that's what happened now. And I see you also touched on a really interesting point, and this goes back to Cali Muscle. 2 points, actually. Cali Muscle's 46 years old. He's freaking jacked. He doesn't even compete. The reason he stays that big and takes all the stuff that he does is just for social media. No one wants to see, and I'm sure people would still watch his stuff if he did get smaller, but in his head, people want to see jacked, shredded Cali Muscle, so he's going to run whatever he needs to stay that size for his social media. Now, here's another thing about Cali Muscle. He was talking about how he had kind of edema and a lot of water weight that would pop up in his ankles and his feet, and his doctors would talk to him about heart stuff, but he didn't want to hear it. And I think a lot of these bodybuilders run into that as well. Let's say you're 4 weeks out from a show, and this is your big show. This is your career. This is what makes you money. This is what can get you sponsorships. And the doctor says, bro, your blood pressure's through the roof. Your lipids are down. You're having this. And they're like, fuck it. I'm 4 more weeks, and then I can chill. Then I'll take care of my health.
That's a really good point. Like I had a gentleman who people just come talk to you in the gym when you're in shape, right? And they'll ask questions. And so I had this gentleman, and he's around 60 years old, and he's running 750 milligrams of test a week. Doesn't compete, doesn't look like he competes, looks like a normal dude. And I think that I definitely have a biased opinion because I pay attention to health and I pay attention to what I put in my body, but there's a tremendous portion of the population, just like in general, who does not pay attention to their health. It doesn't matter that they're in bodybuilding, and they just don't do the necessary steps to take care of, whether it's your blood pressure, or you realize your kidney function is getting worse and worse and worse. Your liver enzymes have been elevated for fucking 3 years, and you wonder why you have liver failure or other things. And what you were saying, Dave, that's a really good point, because you have, if somebody's taking something for a longer period of time, you have that happening, right? You're taking drugs for, 27 years or 37 years versus, 10, 15, 20 years, right? So the duration is a lot longer. But then also, what happens just naturally to humans as they age? Less resilience. So I thought that was a really good point. They need to be like the nuance up there of like, you're far less resilient at 46 years old than you are at, say, 31 years old or 29 years old. Big difference. Even though it's only 15 years, but there's a big difference.
And one other thing is, our food system has completely changed. Our food system is trash compared to what it used to be. So you want to talk about cholesterol buildup and plaque buildup and all that stuff just from the food alone that we're surrounded by. I mean, we have small businesses going out within the last year because of everything that transpired, and more fast food restaurants popping up. And back when they were doing in California, they literally had a meal called the Bodybuilder that they would go and they would smoke weed and then they would eat that meal, right? But it was like basically home cooked, like breakfast food in the restaurant, and it was probably farm to table kind of thing. Now farm to table, like you're paying extra for, like, and you need to find a place.
It's gonna be like 1 out of 10 or 1 out of 15 restaurants before you can even find somebody who does farm to table kind of thing. You were about to say something, Test Your Limits?
Yeah, so I watched the video that Greg Doucette did on, I believe it was Sean Roden or someone else, and basically his thought process, and I kind of agreed with this, that the way to make bodybuilding somewhat safer, at least near competition, is to have more weight classes. So when you go from, I don't know all the things, but I think it was like, for one thing, you have to go from like 215 to like 235 or something like that. And he was saying that jump from when you first become a professional to be able to jump 30 or 25 or 30 pounds, that takes a lot of stuff. And he was saying if you could only had to jump up 15 pounds, you're using less stuff. So his thought was to make more classes. I thought that was a pretty good idea. I still have an open class, but I thought that was interesting. Have more weight classes. So someone like Keon can say, okay, well, I want to compete at this, or maybe I want to drop down 15 pounds, and compete at 200 or something like that, instead of having to make these massive, 30-pound jumps.
Now, I'm going to disagree with that statement due to the fact that we have classic now, and there are different weight classes by height. So if you don't fall into some type of bodybuilding or you don't want to get that big, you can fall into it. They have a 212 class now, which usually you kind of transpire into 212 naturally if you just outgrow classic. And then you also have open bodybuilding, which some people have the genetics just for open body, like they're just going to go into open bodybuilding. Some people abuse stuff to get into open bodybuilding to fill out their frame, which I personally don't agree with. People are going to live their lives how they're going to want to live their lives. I personally would not do it. It's just not what I would want to do. I have a big frame. I have a lot to fill out, and I'm going to let it fill out over time and fall where I fall, which I can still fall into classic physique. In fact, this year I kind of almost downsized without trying to, just because I haven't been able to bodybuild really. And it's going to benefit me when I have to go into a show. I may not even try to grow and just come into a show and see how I look and let my body kind of grow into a pro level, because you get an extra 10 pounds from amateur to pro at classic. Now you can do, and then in bodybuilding at amateur level, this is probably what he's referring to, is just kind of shift that into the bodybuilding world, the pro world. Is you have a bunch of different weight classes. You have like welterweight, you have middleweight, you have light heavyweight, then you have heavyweight, and then you have super heavyweight. So there's a bunch of different classes. So I understand where he's going with it, but I feel like there's a place for everyone now with classic coming into the mix. Before that, when it was 212 and open, I completely agree with that, because you'd have to wear board shorts and do physique. Not.
It's interesting because classic has just exploded. I do see that though, because there's guys who don't want to do classic, and in their minds, just like a lot of people don't take care of their health in their minds, and this is probably a tiny fucking percentage of the people who actually compete, but who are like, oh, well, I need to compete at 250, 260 to be there. And psychologically for them, they're like, oh, I need to take a lot more shit because the top 5 guys are in the 245 to 275 range, 285 in that range. So they're like, even to be in the realm, I need to be in that category. And I'm sure there's a small subset of people where if they did do something in a different category, could be very beneficial for that subset of people who just like has that psychological thing, like I need to be fucking bigger to compete at like the top 6 level kind of thing.
Yeah, I think it would, if they had some more classes, and I'm not big into the bodybuilding world, you'd have more champions. So you'd have more like sponsorship, and I think there'd be a lot more news into, okay, well, this person's dropping down into this, and now they're a front runner in this, and this person's first year jumping up to this class. It'll be interesting to see how he competes. I don't know. I just thought that was interesting what Greg said. It made sense to me, but I don't know the bodybuilding stuff. So
let me challenge you with other sports though really fast. There's different leagues of football, right? But besides the NCAA and NFL, do you know any other teams? I don't know one player on the. I don't even know a name of the other teams. So same thing would transpire. It would eventually, I think it would wash it out a little bit, because we already have, like, we have a few classes. We have 4 different classes for bodybuilding, and you're going to fall into one. Let your body fall where it needs to fall. And then even like in the women's side, like if you're just more muscularly dense, like if you're bikini, then you're bikini. If you're more muscularly dense on the lower body, you have the wellness division now. Before, you got docked in figure for having too big of legs. So now you have a division for you. So there's literally a division for males and females on all sides of the board, in my personal opinion.
You need like that gold standard. You need like the pinnacle, I feel like, without it being completely to like, because I don't know of any other league. I mean, I don't pay attention to sports, but yeah, like I feel like having the pinnacle to point at for an organization, I think is a valuable thing. I do agree with that. Yeah. So
definitely an interesting topic. I think we're going to wrap this up because we're going to try to do 3 episodes, and we've got 3 hours of hosting for this month. But I want to pose an interesting just question that we'll cover next one. So to make bodybuilding safer, should they focus less on conditioning and being just so dry and dehydrated, and maybe focus more on symmetry? I don't know. We'll talk about that next time. But anyway, guys, you can find us on social media, YouTube, Dynamite D on Instagram. Look up David Demesquita on YouTube. Look up Sam Stolt on Instagram and YouTube. You can find me on YouTube and Instagram as well. Test your levels. So you guys are awesome. I thought this was a really good show, and we'll see you guys next time.
Yes, thank you, everybody who's listening. And if you enjoy the show, leave us a comment and or share this with somebody else. It really helps out the channel and the podcast grow. So we would appreciate it.
See you on the next episode.